Nigeria boasts of more than 250 tribes and languages, with distinct cultures and traditional rulers. These traditional rulers command respect from their subjects and wield considerable influence, sometimes within and outside their domains. During the colonial period, the British practiced indirect rule and administered northern Nigeria through the traditional rulers, an approach that was later extended to the south. Much later, the introduction of a legislative council with some elected members in the south relegated the traditional rulers to mainly symbolic roles. After independence, there was a gradual relegation of the roles of the traditional rulers, as most powers resided with governments. In spite of the fact that traditional rulers ascend the throne by inheritance or appointment by a council of elders, government became more involved in monarchical succession, which explains why government could depose some rulers. Also, traditional rulers are classified as first-class, second-class, and third-class rulers, depending on the political and economic influence they wield in their domains and beyond, as well as the dominance of their kingdom before and during the colonial era. Major roles of the rulers include mediation between the people and the government. Resolving conflicts among subjects were some of the roles. Many have clamored that due to their closeness to the grassroots, as well as their roles in stabilizing the polity, traditional rulers should have constitutional roles. Those in favor argue that it will also help to preserve Nigeria's rich cultural heritage from going into extinction. Now, to what extent will constitutional roles for traditional rulers help to strengthen Nigeria's unity? These and some issues that will engage guests on Good Morning Nigeria shortly.
Indeed, Oyemi, thank you for posing those questions. Indeed, that's part of what our guests in the studio will be giving us some insight into. But first, let's welcome all our guests who are seated. Joining us via Zoom is His Royal Majesty King Alfred Papa Priye Jetespave, and he's the Amainabo of Tuan Bra and Chairman Bra's Bayelsa State Traditional Rulers Council and pioneer military governor of Old River State. Of course, he'll be joining us soon. You'll get to see him very soon as we get our connection right. Also joining us from Tai in River State is His Royal Majesty King Godwin N.K. Giniwa, is the Benemene Tai Kingdom, and of course President Supreme Council of Ogoni Traditional Rulers and former Chairman River State Council of Traditional Rulers. Of course, both kings will be joining us, of course, via virtually from their different kingdoms. That's Tai, local government area of River State, and Yanagua, that's in Bayelsa. But let me welcome Professor Joy Izilo. She's a familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria. She's a professor of public law, of course, at the University of Nigeria in Nsukka, former UN Special Rapporteur, human rights lawyers and activist, especially for gender inclusion. Well, I understand she also will be joining us. We are trying to establish our connection. You can see you did catch a glimpse of her right there. So both all the three guests I have mentioned will be joining us in a short while. Kinsley, I think you have to introduce our guests here in the studio.
All right. Yes, with us here at the Abuja studios, we would like to welcome Professor Kabiru Mato. He's a political scientist and has been our guest from time to time. He's been our wall for a while. Professor Mato, delighted to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kinsley. Thank you.
Also here with us in the studios, we'd like to welcome Dr. Philip Afaha. He's an associate professor of history and head of the Department of History at the University of Abuja. Dr. Afaha, delighted to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, of course, as my colleague Claire indicated, we are awaiting the connections via Zoom to the two majesties who were earlier introduced. Professor Joy Izilo, you saw a while ago on the screen. She's with us from our Enugu Network Center. But Let's begin the conversation this way before we bring in our other guests. Professor Kabiru Mato,
yes.
There's been this clamor. I mean, it comes on and off, hot and cold from time to time, for us to have constitutional roles specifically assigned to traditional rulers. What is it that is being sought in this clamor? Is it a fusion of constitutional democracy and monarchical rule, or what?
Well, thank you very much, Kingsley. As you rightly said, this has been a recurring debate, for a very long time. I remember sometimes in 2000, or just before the first constitutional amendment, the National Assembly was almost, at the stage of considering the possibilities of assigning roles to the traditional rulers, until perhaps what they thought was a spurious argument emerged, and the whole idea was, put to rest that material time. I want to think that, on a very serious note, that the role which traditional institution plays, in nation building, cannot necessarily be assigned or consigned to what you refer to as constitutional role. I don't like a situation where the traditional rulers that are revered and seen as custodians of traditional institutions, are political, etc., are assigned constitutional roles which invariably will mean subjecting them to certain, political expectations. And that, in my view, will be tantamount to eroding, the concept of traditionalism, that the institution itself, has evolved over time. And especially in the Nigerian scenario, when you look at, the history of the different societies and communities, prelude to this program, it was mentioned that, a lot of the institutions actually existed even before the advent of colonial rule. Kanem Borno Empire, for instance, the Korarafa Kingdom, etc., Kingdom of Benin, and so many others have predated colonial administration. They existed for, quite a longer period of time than the current modern state system, as we have it. Where we lost it, in my humble view, was our inability ab initio to try, perhaps, to put together the traditional method of administration vis-a-vis the Western liberal democratic contraption which we have, tried to imbibe. We lost that, and perhaps that is responsible for the obvious socio-political and at times economic crisis that we are facing as a nation and as a people, because we have not been able to imbibe truly the Western liberal democratic contraption of democracy fully, and we have lost our traditional institutions. We have lost our traditional method of governance. Why did the British find it convenient in northern Nigeria and southwestern part of this country and other areas like the Kingdom of Benin, where you had hierarchical system of administration, to force their colonial hegemony? It was because there were organized system of, relationship among the citizens in these particular areas. Now, soon after that, we got educated, we went to school, and we began to see the traditional institutions as aberrations. We saw our rulers, and our leaders as, as cheats, exploiting our resources, etc., all sort of, nomenclature and gramophones. People who went to school began to attribute this to traditional institution. And the implication of this is that it severely denudated, it eroded, whatever charisma, whatever belief on the system that subsequent, generations of Nigerians will have over that. So I am of the view that it is safer for the traditional institution to remain apolitical. Okay, and if it should remain apolitical, then the idea of inserting it, any specific role for it in the constitution, aside from the role that they play. I tell you that the traditional rulers or the institution play very significant role in at least maintaining peace and stability within the Nigerian nation. I have seen that several times. We have seen that as Nigerians several times, where the military regimes, not even civil democratic leaders as we have today, will have to rush back to the traditional institution to seek for intervention during moments of local or national crisis. So I think it's better for the traditional institution to remain outside of the. Yes, it is the responsibility of the governor to decide or to approve who becomes a traditional ruler in any domain based on certain criteria that have been put in place by the various laws, And this is a matter of, I think concurrent responsibility. It's basically a state affair as far as the Nigerian system is concerned.
Professor Mato, thank you.
Yeah.
From your perspective, you think they should remain apolitical?
They should remain apolitical.
Dr. Philip Afa, you are an associate professor of history, so let's get back to history. We're still grappling with democracy and our democratic structures. You heard Professor Mato talk about that. We also use adjectives like nascent to describe our democracy. So would it be out of place to embed a traditional system of governance within the democratic system that we are yet to have full grasp with? What are your thoughts?
Yes, like the topic of this discussion is talking about making it, giving them constitutional role. I think we always miss the point when we mention constitutional role as regards to the traditional institution. The traditional institution, when we say that, we are giving an impression as if it is illegality in Nigeria. The traditional institution is operating under the laws of Nigeria. You don't need to be in the Constitution, written down in the Constitution, like the 1999 Constitution, the amended Constitution that we are using. You don't need your name to be written there, Philip Afa on page 5, for you to know that you have been carried along in the Constitution. At the state levels, there is no state in this country that does not have an edict in place that recognizes, regulates, remunerates traditional rulers. Now, when people always say, they should be given constitutional role, I think they are actually asking for more glamour because they have been given, in quote, constitutional role. You've been asked to promote the culture of your people. You've been asked to advise states and local government in your domain. You've been asked to resolve disputes among your people. You've been asked to do several other things. The problem that we have in Nigeria regarding the traditional institution is that I believe the traditional institution itself has not been able to interpret and articulate its mandate optimally, such that when somebody is made a village head, maybe in my village, and he thinks he's the governor of the state. No, you are the village head. First, find out what you are supposed to do by law. And if you know the role you are supposed to play in the society by law, legally, I don't think there will be this issue of, let us have constitutional role. Has anybody been able to define or to explain what do you mean by constitutional rule? Because when the colonialists were exiting, of course, like Professor said, the colonialists ruled through the traditional institutions. So the powers, the entire powers were in their hands. They only needed to report to the white men. When they were about exiting, the white men were about exiting the system, you notice that the constitutions during the First Republic was running a parliamentary system. So the parliament was between House of Chiefs, that was traditional institution, and houses of assemblies in the regions. Now, they played the role of the legislature. Along the line, during the military, in 1979, they say, okay, you are not expected to play this role again of being the legislature, but you are still relevant in the Nigerian project, in the system. They continue to be relevant. As Professor Kabiru rightly alluded, even the military, the recognitions that were given to traditional institutions, the military actually leverage on traditional institution for validity, for validation.
So for you, there is no need to assign a constitutional role. They already have it.
They already have it. What they need now is for their authorities, is for more glamour. They need to be enhanced. Institutions need to be enhanced by one, training the traditional rulers themselves.
Let's get a constitutional lawyer. Professor Joy Ezilo is with us. She's joining us from our Enugu studio. Unfortunately, she's a constitutional lawyer and, of course, professor of public law. Professor Joy Ezilo, we need some clarifications now. We probably would like you to tell us what does it mean when we say we want to assign constitutional roles to our traditional rulers.
I've been enjoying the discussions by those there at the studio. I think, yes, we all agree there has been a testifying call for a national or constitutional role for traditional rulers. And there are strongly those in favor and in opposition. As you can imagine, the traditional National Council of Traditional Rulers have been leading this advocacy, and there are also others who are opposing. And if you look at, there is no constitutional role. What they're asking for is for restatement of constitutional role in terms of what used to be. And then within that, there are various schools of thought. If you're talking about that, what do you provide for them? For example, will it be at federal level, they could just have National Council of Traditional Law, which already they have, but then formalizing the structure kind of and giving it legal backing. And then at state level, they could have House of Chiefs. And but then I think the issue is we have to put it in context. And then before we begin to talk about law, and must it be constitutional role? Because if you're looking at traditional rulers or the institution, which is well recognized in our system, is not in doubt. Are we talking about tenure? They don't have tenure, and we are running a constitutional democracy with certain constitutionalism or constitutional enshrined principles. And you know, some of them is by succession, is by hereditary, is by appointment. There is no uniformity in terms of how they are appointed. And if you formalize it, and if you have a constitutional rule, given even the current, what we have at the moment, where the institutions, some will argue have been discredited. They have also, just like other institutions in Nigeria, suffered the general malaise of corruption. And some of them they have become very political, and of course, many are saying remain apolitical. But those who have failed to be swayed by the government of the day have also been punitively dethroned. And there are many of them are ready to dance to the tune. And with the phenomena of autonomous community, you find that there are many traditional, there are thousands of them now, especially in the southern part of Nigeria. So how are you going to give roles to them? Or will it be their representative that will feature and be a part of the Senate at national level? Will it be ceremonial, for example? And then what value? And we are talking about an age where everybody is conscious of cost of governance. What will that portend? But again, the importance of even discussing this is that we all are aware that traditional rulers or traditional institutions or traditional leaders alongside the local government are the closest to the people. And if they are truly, or if they emerge and command the respect of their people, they have the capacity or the potential to be more impactful, through their work in their lives. We already know that some of them are taking important roles of mitigation in conflict. They can play a major role in community policing, in securing lives and property at the community level. But must that be constitutional? I think that's the key question. And I want to differ that we don't need a constitutional role for them in order to provide for that. We can provide for that by state laws. Even the federal law, National Assembly can make a law that will work maybe for the FCT, and the rest of the state will. Already some of them do have laws actually, but they can also enact laws that will deal with not just the welfare, but will also give them some roles. At the level of local government, they could have advisory role. Let their role remain maybe advisory, consultative, and then mitigation in conflict, and then within community policing, they can also find some role for them. Because, it will become we may just find ourselves in a constitutional crisis. An aberration, on one hand, one of the basic principles that are enshrined in Constitution is periodic election. And then you have people or office holders protected under that constitution that run in perpetuity, that people don't even have the power to elect or to change, and then they have influence over the people and can take decisions because they are recognized in the constitution and they've been elevated to that status that impact on the people. And they may not command the respect of their people. And we know that with corruption, even the mitigation and conflict that they are doing, we now know that most of them are not impartial arbiter, and they swear to those who have the money and the wealth. And then some also acquire land by force belonging to the community. And a lot of things that I have had to mediate or handle in my course of work as a lawyer also cast doubt. But I am in agreement that they need to be strengthened by legislative framework, but it must not be through a constitutional means, because it might create more problem that it would solve. It's a kind of double-edged sword, and we have to not only tread cautiously, but again look at all the problem we have, even structurally and legally speaking. And then we are still working to amend the constitution and then to give constitutional legitimacy to an institution that is undemocratic, unless you tell me that we now begin to talk about them running for election, which will become abnormal. So let them command the respect they do at their level. Let their community, let the local government, let they have, and in fact, most of these things are happening. They already have a structure at state level. They have council. At local government, they have their council. They have their leaders at national level, and then they have all this. What they need, what they're asking for, I believe, is more legal backing that will mean additional budgetary cost, and who will bear that cost. And will it be a case of he who pays the piper dictates the tune? If the federal government start controlling traditional institutions, then they become answerable to them instead of the people. Meanwhile, they are closest to the people in the community. And we wouldn't want a situation, maybe they run to federal government, and at the state level, there is a bit of, they are competing for powers with the state governors. So we have to really leave this to the local government, residual laws and state laws, and then again give them necessary empowerment to function. But what is important is to realize that even the institution itself is not inclusive. And we're also talking about an age for inclusion, diversity, gender equality. So it's already marginalized a huge half of the population of Nigeria, including those who cannot, because they are caste system or one kind of discrimination or the other, they are even treated as unequal, who can't ascend to that tour. There are certain parts of Nigeria, especially the southeast, where tussles for traditional leadership, tussles dominate even court cases and land disputes. And once you elevate it to constitutional level, I think it will even get worse. It will heighten the current tensions that we have. But I'm in agreement that there should be some level of role which will involve their playing role around religion, culture, mediation of conflict, and then the state laws can assign them those specific laws, including bylaws of local government, by the way.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Joy Ezilo. I just would like you, for the benefit of our viewers, to explain further some of the issues raised by Dr. Afaha with regard to existing chieftaincy laws in the various states, which of course will be the basis for the legal existence of the traditional institutions. But perhaps again, for the benefit of our viewers, in explaining what role traditional rulers play, there's perhaps little recognition that traditional rulers also exercise judicial functions or judicial authority. Customary law is recognized in our legal system to the extent, of course, that it passes the repugnancy test and the other criteria. But you do know that in some very well-established traditional institutions, disputes are taken to the palace, and the disputes are settled, and the parties abide by those disputes, more like you would find in our legal system. Is this something that we need to escalate into constitutional provisions, or we let it be, such as has been suggested with other administrative or executive powers that traditional rulers already have?
The customary courts are provided even in the Constitution. And we know that if you're testing the validity of those customary laws, one of the clear means of doing so is also of proving that is the testimony or evidence by traditional chiefs or traditional leaders. So they already have function. And in some localities, some of them have also been appointed customary court judges. But of course, not all of them can assume that role. But we could have, that's why I said the state legislation will be best to deal with this. A situation where even the customary court will be kind of a panel that the chiefs of those localities in rotation can be part of that in mediation of conflict, just to formalize it and give it that legal backing for enforcement. Because if you don't have that backing, some of them already are suffering it. They're mediating cases and people don't respect that decision. But again, though, for traditional rulers that command respect of their communities, once they mediate and the parties refuse to implement, the sanctions that follow we know, ostracizing the person, including banishment and all of that. But we know there is no customary criminal law, so they can't even deal with those kind of cases, and they can only cooperate with authorities, including whether it's in community policing or with the police. But what we see even these days is that some of them are active in lawmaking, and they make these bylaws not really formalized, but where they even ban their communities from inviting police in matters that they have not heard or mediated. So I think we should leave that. I agree that there is need to harmonize and have a level of law for codification, because even the customary law itself is not codified, but not one that can attain or we should put into the constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. If we are to have different state constitutions, definitely it would be a matter for that. But I think it's a matter that legislation, ordinary legislation, can of course deal with. Because remember, our constitution very difficult to amend. Land Use Act in the constitution. So many things that people have been agitating. Let's get out of the constitution for easy amendments. They are still there. Then you go and add constitutional traditional rulers. Tomorrow we find all the problems with that, and then we can't amend, and we are stuck with it. I don't think it's very progressive. Yes, we have to find a role for them. They are already playing a role, some of them, and some also are undermining even our democratic process. But be that as it may, I don't think, and I still, that's my opinion, of course. Currently they don't derive their relevance or authority from the Constitution, and because they lack some kind of uniformity in terms of appointment and even removal. We know they are certified even in a questionable manner, including those that are imposed even on the community, despite resistance of the community. Some communities have gone a step further, at least in my part of the world, to even elect their traditional rulers, and they queue and elect their traditional rulers. And we know the role even money plays, even for those who attempt to do that. So I think we should leave it as it is currently, and then leave it administratively, and continue to build on that, or even rather set up a more strategic committee instead of it becoming a legal subterfuge. We have to be very careful in putting it in the Constitution. That still remains my opinion.
Professor Jaizilu, thank you. Let's come back to the professor of political science, the political scientist here with us, Professor Kabiru Mato. And Professor Jaizilu made, an observation, which I would like you to clarify. She says that the traditional stool is undemocratic. Now, I want to refer you to a political scientist who also said, and I like to quote him, I think it's Vishnu Noso. I'm sure you remember his quote. He says, the traditional institution is an arena of local politics where people learn their first lessons in the art of governance. He continues, until we learn to govern or to be governed by our neighbors, we cannot, successfully govern people who are at a distance. So that gives us an insight of how democratic the traditional institution is. And if you also will, the traditional rulers in the past, the colonial masters were able to succeed in the north, for instance, because they already had a centralized a system, a formalized system. You understand? So it wasn't, there wasn't a void. There wasn't a democratic void. It was because there was a democratic system, that was why the colonial masters were able to succeed where they did.
Yeah, I think Joy is defining democracy from the contraption of a periodic election based on the Western liberal model. If that's what she's talking about, then it's right. But what you mentioned about the evolution of traditional institution, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, is not necessarily like, yes, they are not elected. They don't stand elected. But within the ruling houses, you have contestants at all times, and these contestants are, of course, either elected or selected, depending on the language that you may wish to, deploy to qualify.
That was the traditional system.
That was the traditional system. Now, you see, we lost it in Nigeria actually at the end of the First Republic. With the emergence of the first military rule in this country, we lost it. And I think the bulk of the agitation for restructuring in this country should otherwise focus on how you can make, more meaning out of the Nigerian alliance and the so-called federating units rather than a lot of other flimsies that we are talking about. How did we lose it? During the colonial period, it was easier, yes, for colonial administrators to force indirect rule through the traditional institutions. As you rightly mentioned, it has trickled down from the top to the bottom. Method of administrative rapportage and what have you. That was there. Now, when before the soldiers came, even after independence.
And that was the basis for the formation of the third tier of government.
That's what I'm saying. That's it. Even after independence, what precisely happened was that in northern Nigeria, for instance, the constitution of Nigeria actually recognized only the center and the regions. And the same constitution empowered the regions to make laws suitable for local administration within each and every region. And that's why in northern Nigeria you had the native authority system where the traditional institution played a pivotal role. Okay? Now, here we are, military system has made us look more like a unitary than a federal system. States, governors taking instructions from Supreme Military Council, Armed Forces, etc., etc. And then when we transited to civil administration, it became difficult, okay, for Nigeria, or in the process of crafting our laws, to be able to observe the so-called peculiarities and similarities that exist within the units of the Nigerian Federation. So it's now very difficult for anybody to be able to, if you talk about units of federation, what is the difference between Kano and Jigawa State, of Oyo and Osun State, or Imo and Anambra State, okay, as units of federation? What are those differences and peculiarities that they have, okay, that first and foremost made them to be units of federation separate from one another? You understand what I'm saying? So it is obviously a matter of great proportion. If you restructure Nigeria in a manner that you recognize probably two levels of administration, just like the last national conference under the government of Goodluck Jonathan, agreed, okay, allow the 36 states of the federation to also have their constitutions. Remove the local government level. Because there are a lot of peculiarities in how each of these 36 states actually is. As it is today, we are running, in my view, a glorified unitary system of government, because what the councillor, for instance, in Gombe State will expect to collect as remuneration is the same thing with the councillor who comes from perhaps Bayelsa State, despite the huge oil resources that accrue to that state. And so where is the basis of the federal structure there? So I am of the view that if any role for that matter, and of course I made it sufficiently clear that we should not try to politicize the traditional institution by inserting any role for them in the constitution, aside from the already pivotal role they are playing in maintaining national unity and tranquility.
Okay. Professor Mato, thank you very much. Earlier, my colleague had indicated that we'll be joined via Zoom by one of revered traditional rulers. We would like to welcome at this time His Royal Majesty, King Godwin Ginika, JPOFR, Benemene of Ogoni Land and President, Supreme Council of Ogoni Traditional Rulers. Is also former chairman of the River State Traditional Rulers Council. Your Majesty, our pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria, and we do hope that you've had the benefit of listening in on the comments by our three guests Professor Joy Zilo, who is a professor of public law at the University of Nigeria and Nsukka, is with us at the Enugu Network Center. Professor of political science, Kabiru Mato, who just finished speaking here in the Abuja studios, and Dr. Afaha, who is an associate professor and head of history at the University of Abuja. Your Royal Majesty, they've raised a number of very pertinent issues, but tell us from the position of the traditional stool, why should there be any constitutional rule for our royal fathers against the background of what we have experienced? All right, it looks like there's still the audio challenge to the Zoom connection to His Royal Majesty. Royal Majesty, presumably you heard my question, but assuming you didn't, let me just recast it succinctly. Why should there be a role assigned to traditional rulers, specifically in our Constitution? It looks like still the audio has been sorted out. Once our engineers are able to get that, then we'll get back. Dr. Philip Afaha, let's also take a look at this. I know that Professor Joy Zulu will also come in terms of situating the constitutional provisions. We saw a major departure in our 1999 Constitution, where, you know, in terms of the legislative chambers, you no longer had a House of Chiefs. And the 1999 Constitution borrows heavily from that. But there were unsavory experiences in the First Republic between political gladiators, these were called politicians, and traditional rulers who were also playing a political role that Kabir Mato says, look, insulate them from this. And some persons believe that it was those unsavory experiences that then informed the absence of any constitutional role assigned to traditional rulers effective 1999 Constitution. Were traditional rulers, as part of the political structure and constitutional democracy in the First Republic, really helpful, or otherwise, I don't want to use the word unhelpful, but what real value did they offer or present to the First Republic, which of course collapsed after 5 years and some months?
Yes, we must understand and really give credence to the traditional institution in the First Republic. Remember, throughout the colonial rule, it was the traditional institution that participated in governance. They were the ones that were actually running the show and reporting to the colonialists. Now, at First Republic, Nigeria needed the traditional institutions who at that time were coming in with experience that even the political class did not have in managing people and resources, in articulating government policies. It was the traditional institution that knew those things. The political class and later the military had to learn from the wealth of experiences of the traditional institutions. Well, that has been their business from time, even when the white men were here. So they were so important to the system, they were so significant as at the First Republic, because they had to get these politicians that were coming into show newly to learn the ropes in how to run government, how to do the policies, how to execute them, the tax systems. All these things were being done by the traditional institutions before First Republic. So Nigeria needed traditional rulers as at the First Republic to play that role. That is why it is not also good to always dismiss what the military did. The military must have noted one or two frictions. They must have noted one or two issues that made the military, as at 1979, to say, okay, let traditional rulers rule be limited to conflict resolution, be limited to advisory role, and all those things. They did not do that because they were drunk. They knew what they were doing. As at the time they took that decision, it was necessary that the traditional religion should be divorced from the day-to-day running of government, so as to maybe to retain their dignity. So it was good. So as far as First Republic was concerned, the traditional rulers were so necessary because they were the ones that were to come and birth the system of government, the system of government that Nigeria later enjoyed. You needed them at that point in time.
Dr. Afaha, thanks. Professor Kabiru, but I would like you to weigh in on this. Yes, in terms of the administrative structure under the colonial authority, traditional rulers were very prominent. But there was also the parallel role played by political activists who felt that there had to be an end to colonial rule. And once the political activists, who were now politicians, succeeded in installing a constitutional democracy, beginning, of course, with the various constitutional conferences, regional administration, self-rule, and ultimately independence, the tension between the political class and the traditional class was almost inevitable.
Yes, it was because, you see, it's a case of what you call revolution of high-rising expectation. The traditional institution was deeply in place. It was, even at the advent of colonial rule, used as the instrument of administration. Laws are passed from top to bottom, and then the feedback mechanism was also, the same manner. But soon after colonial rule, I think the role that the traditional institution played more was advisory. Yes, you had Council of Chiefs, Assembly of Chiefs in virtually, all the 3 regions across the country. As it is today, you have Council of Chiefs in virtually all the 36 states of the Federation, including Federal Capital Territory. And they play certain specific advisory roles to the government in power. Okay, so the rivalry, or whatever you may wish to call it, that existed between perhaps the emerging political class and the dominant traditional institution during colonial rule and First Republic obviously had to exist because a new crop of ruling class was emerging, okay, that eventually subordinated, the traditional institution by, the adoption of this Western liberal method of democracy that we are adopting today. But I want to say again,
Professor Nasa, I think we just want to hold you because
we understand that the audio connection to His Royal Majesty King Godwin Guinewa, JPOFR, who is the President of Supreme Council of Ogun Traditional Rulers. The audio connection is okay now. That's what our engineers are telling us. Your Royal Majesty, once again, we apologize for the glitches in our Zoom connection. I just wanted to find out if you've had the benefit of listening to what our 3 guests have been saying, and therefore what your Majesty's view would be on why there should be constitutional role specifically assigned to traditional rulers, considering the enormous influence and powers that they wield already.
I have started saying that the governance of this country, that the traditional rulers are the foundation of the government in day. But I can assure you that I don't know what happened in the north, but where I come from, the south, and the east, the traditional rulers are not well recognized so much as we are supposed to be. I don't blame them because it's not in any constitution. So it should be enshrined into the constitution so that we can know our limits and our powers. We are the founder of this place. We own this place. We own everything. So we should be taken care of. And we are the people that are making sure that there is peace at the grassroots end. we played a vital role in the governance of the state and the federation.
I was just wondering, Your Royal Majesty, one more time, just to restate very briefly some of the points that have been articulated by our guests, and what is, of course, fairly obvious, that, for instance, every state of the Federation has its respective chieftaincy law on the basis of which traditional rulers are classified: first class traditional rulers, second class, and so on and so forth. And their duties, rights, privileges, and remuneration are all indicated in those laws. And those laws, of course, also derive from the Constitution. So what exactly would be the necessity of having a constitutional rule specified in any provision in the Constitution, considering also, Your Majesty, as our guests have also mentioned, and as we also know full well, that our traditional systems are not uniform throughout the country. In fact, by the time you cross one boundary to another, you are likely to find a different traditional system. So, are you going to have a unitary system of traditional authority and governance if you were to enshrine it in the Constitution?
Thank you so much. I don't think military will help us. Let us be democratical. But as far as I'm concerned, the law of chieftaincy and traditional leadership should be enshrined into the country's constitution, so that whatever happened in the north happened in the west.
Well, we have lost that connection again. We do
Yeah.
hope that we can, we will, okay, I'm told he's back now. Your Royal Majesty, King Giniwa, thank you. But I would like you to explain to us, you talked about the fact that enshrining or assigning constitutional roles to traditional rulers will give you more recognition. I would like you to tell us in what context, because already traditional rulers play a very vital role, and there is hardly any serious, national deliberation and national issues that the traditional rulers are not consulted, or even your opinions or your thoughts in any matter. So, in what context of recognition are you talking about?
Well, recognition in the different angle. The government of Rivers State, the government of Imo State, the government of the South should be able to recognize traditional rulers. Though we have a council headed by our chairman, I have been there before. But you don't blame the politicians, because they are only doing what they say in the Constitution. And they are the people that handled all the bulk of resources. But I want to remind you that that whatever is happening in Nigeria, it is the traditional rulers that are the foundation of whatever we are doing today. Apart from that, we are in the rural villages making sure that there is peace everywhere. That one is a big role that we are playing. Without peace, there will be no development. And then somebody outside there cannot go and know what is happening in your domain. You know their tradition, you know their behavior, you know each and every one of them. And we have sleepless nights making sure that we succeed. We should be properly taken care of. I'm not talking in terms of money anyway. Money is on its own side. But what of high recognition and respect? which we are losing here. I want to tell the federal government, because they are the fathers of the country, that if it is constitutional right, they should be able to enshrine the traditional leadership in, so that what happened in the north happened in the west, and happened to us here in the at the grassroots. We deserve some respect. We deserve some very good treatment. All the people from the president to the councillors, they are all our subjects. And we owe them to make sure that
Your Royal Majesty, Your Royal Majesty, please pardon my interjection at this point. I would like you to clarify some of the issues you have raised about more respect and more attention. I was just wondering, there is no human being without a cultural background, and especially for us in Africa, and more so in Nigeria, we pride ourselves with our culture. And our traditional institutions are revered. And so it would be unthinkable for any one of us, I mean, depending on where you come from, to be disrespectful of the traditional institutions. I'm sure Your Majesty would have witnessed this. Even politicians, when they are on the political campaigns, they make it a duty to stop by the palaces and to get the blessings of the traditional authority. So there is that respect already accorded. But I was just wondering also, Your Majesty, are traditional rulers without a constitutional rule ineffective?
Well, I think that the fault is not from the politicians. Though I don't know whether we have any place in the Constitution. We have any way in the Constitution of this country. If we have a national constitutional right, we can fight our battle. That is, if our governors did not respect us, or if the president does not respect us. But in the absence of any constitution right we have, from father to beggars, yes, because there is nothing you can do. And the worst part of it is that when they drag us into politics, sometimes you go out of your way, you love them with your son and support them. At the end of the day, no return. We deserve so much honor and respect, and good services to ourselves and our people. This thing is lacking in Nigeria, particularly in the South. So the question now is that, what do we do?
Let me just ask you this last question. One of our guests, that's Professor Joy Ezilo, mentioned some, issues or challenges, if you may. While it will be difficult to assign constitutional roles to traditional rulers, and one of them she mentioned is tenure and lack of uniformity in how traditional rulers ascend the throne. And of course, there are other issues, that she has also mentioned. Now, if assigning a constitutional role to traditional rulers would also mean having to deal with these issues, and of course denying you, some of you don't have, your tenure is forever. It's hereditary, you were not elected, some of you are selected. It will mean having to deal with these issues. Will traditional rulers be willing, to also give in to some of these, amendments that may come in?
The trouble is that the tradition of this country varies from one place to another. Let me take an example of the enthronement of a king. It cannot be unified because we have different traditions of getting to the throne. So that one, the government cannot handle it. It is only handled by us. But when you have finally succeeded and you are on the throne, it is the duty of the government to take care of you. It is the duty of the traditional rulers to make sure, first of all, you have to respect government, and then cooperate with us to make sure there is peace and development in the area.
Your Royal Majesty, thank you very much. I would like you to listen into the closing thoughts of our other guest, Professor Joy Ezilo. I'd like to raise this question again. I mean, we've listened to His Royal Majesty. We've not had a tremendous amount of time with him. But clearly, what we are dealing with here is, if we were to pursue the argument further, it would be the tension between a monarchical system of government and constitutional democracy. I mean, the imperatives of constitutional democracy would sometimes appear to be antithetical to that of a monarchy. Do we have this clear recognition? And therefore, to avoid challenges going forward, assuming there's a brainwave of enshrining provisions in the Constitution for a role for traditional rulers in the instant republic.
Thank you, Kingsley. I think that's precisely what we have to run away from. And because remember in colonial time, they had a monarchy. It was a monarchical. They have the queen or the king is their system, and that was very convenient for them. In any case, the culture, religion, everything was diverse. But now we are clearly in constitutional democracy, and like I said, there are basic principles that are so fundamental for the success of those for constitutional democracy, which include periodic election, and you don't have a mix of this and that, and it become we have a constitutional crisis in our hands. And apart from that, we cannot, I can foresee a situation where if they push and advocate and they have all the connections, there could be a smuggled in the Constitution. And that will become a legal subterfuge because they may not give them any major role, and it becomes like some of the constitutional issues we are still dealing with local government, whether it's a third tier or fourth tier. And with what His Royal Majesty said, I don't think Constitution can confer legitimacy with regard to traditional institutions and traditional leaders. And we have to get it clear, legality versus legitimacy. Because there is a lot of, he emphasized the fact of respect, recognition, and I could see from the demand of National Council of Traditional Rulers that they want a national role and they want it enshrined in the Constitution. And we are running a federal system of government, and we've been still battling for restructuring, for having a physical federalism, and then you have a traditional rulers recognized in a constitution, and then they have a role and then they are called more to Abuja than serving their people at home. And we're talking about devolution of power as the way to go, and the way that they can have more relevance to their people. And everybody wants to still continue to head to Abuja, so then we're having one big government and we never achieve it right. It's really, I don't think elevating them or giving them constitutional role will even solve their legitimacy problem. Because what happened in southern part of Nigeria, especially southeast and south, is that these people are, some of them are imposed. The certification processes is questionable, and some are imposed, and there is a mixed match of everything. Where you have traditional stools that are hereditary, like the Oba of Benin commands a lot of respect, but even in some parts of Igbo land especially, they resist now any traditional institution that you talk about being hereditary. and just because people are becoming Republican, the people are resisting, and we don't have a monarchical system of governance. And
so go on and on. I know you have a lot to share with us. Unfortunately, we earlier indicated we have a second topic, and we must round off our discussion on this topic. Quite interesting, I must say, and of course there are so many issues that we, of course, would need to address. Professor Joy Ngozi Zilo is Professor of Public Law, University of Nigeria in Nsukka. She's also former United Nations Special Rapporteur, human rights lawyer, and an activist specifically with gender inclusion bias. Professor Joy Zilo, thank you. Let me also acknowledge His Royal Majesty King Godwin Giniwa, Benemene Tai Kingdom. He's also the President, Supreme Council of Ogoni Traditional Rulers, and former Chairman, River State Council of Traditional Rulers. Your Majesty, thank you for joining us all the way from Tai Kingdom. Let us also appreciate right here in the studio Dr. Philip Afaha. He is the Associate Professor of History and Head of the History Department, University of Abuja. Associate Professor, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Professor Kabiru Mato, a political scientist, and as Kingsley said, you were on a roll. Thank you for coming back. Let's appreciate you. Thank you, as always.
All
and
right.
once again, let's also appreciate and do apologize sincerely of course, inability to connect with His Royal Majesty King Alfred Papa Priye Jetispef, who is the Amayanabo of Tuambra and Chairman Bayelsa State Traditional Rulers Council, and also former pioneer military governor of Old River State. We couldn't, of course, connect with you all the way in Yanogwa. We promise we'll do better next time. So that's it for this discussion. Coming up next is our second topic, which of course will have to do with the UNICEF's report, which indicates that Nigeria has overtaken India as the highest contributor, of course, to